Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and senior editor of Subprime Auto Finance News and AutoFin Journal. In today's webinar, SMS Marketing 101 for auto dealers. We're going to learn more with Isaac Hernandez, the Director of Automotive Sales at Podium. But before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items for today's webinar. We are recording today's session and we'll make it available to you as soon as possible. So watch your inbox for a message containing a link to that recording. And if you have any questions for Isaac, please just use the chat function here on the Zoom platform and we'll get to them after his presentation. So let's get right into today's session featuring Isaac Hernandez, the Director of Automotive Sales at Podium. Isaac, welcome. Thank you for being a part of today's webinar.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to present on SMS Marketing 101 today, and tackling this this newfound functionality almost to a point, right? And how we leverage SMS in our marketing strategies. So I am excited to go over that with everyone. But yeah, let's get into it. Today, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to cover text versus email, compliance, best practices, do's and don'ts, how to build your opt-in list. And then at the end, we'll always leave some time for Q&A. But yeah, I think that's what we'll cover today, and make sure you're writing down your questions. Happy to answer all of them, here at the end of the presentation, and discuss a little bit more of the strategy in the automotive industry, what we found, what we've learned, with the with over the 6,000 dealerships that we work with across the country and Northern America. Yeah, I think ultimately, as we start, we know, like many local businesses, dealerships like yourself, SMS marketing can feel daunting. It's a new tool to take on. Getting the required prior consent, otherwise known as opt-ins from your customer, isn't easy. Text software seems complicated. Promotions can frustrate customers. But and we know only 12% of US local businesses use SMS in their marketing strategy, even though it gets up to, an open rate of 98% compared to, your marketing emails. But the truth is, SMS marketing can actually strengthen relationships by inviting responses. Well-timed messages and relevant content makes it feel more intimate than other marketing messages. And it also encourages continued engagement in a way that really only text messaging can. The key is knowing how to message the right way. And I think that's obviously the most important step in leveraging SMS marketing. And that's exactly what we'll talk through today, on this webinar, and share with you some of the secrets of successes we've found, with SMS marketing campaigns as we go through it. Let's jump into texting versus email. And obviously, we start here with the slide where it says it could have been a text. And I think like that kind of relates back to, we all been in a meeting that could have been an email. And these days we've received an email where it could have been a text. It's the fastest way from A to B, as we talked in the last slide. It's a 98% open rate. It's very rare, and I always use the story with myself, and, I hate to admit it, but it's very rare you'll open my phone and find that any of my text messages haven't been opened. Unfortunately, if you open my email, my app probably has thousands of promotional emails and other emails that haven't been opened, just because, it's been a place where we're over communicated to. But breaking it down, SMS marketing is the practice of using texting to convert leads and keep customers engaged. As a rule of thumb, messages are usually 160 characters or less. So short and sweet is I think the key here. And that's probably, that's why most text messages have that 160 characters or less. It's meant to be a short and sweet message. There are multiple ways to utilize texting. Today, we'll focus on using it to communicate things like promotions, updates, that have changed, with business hours or service updates and events to your customer base. And another place that I want, all of the dealerships to think about is this has been, for, in our experience and what we found with SMS marketing is think of it in a way to combat the inventory shortage that we've all dealt with, and running promotions for, people coming up on leases, buybacks, people that, have been in cars for a while, and a way to build up that used inventory is another way to think of SMS marketing and a way that you can communicate with your customers. But yeah, let's take a look at email by the numbers first. So, I think we're all very familiar with email, but email as the marketing channel and using it in promotions as far as blasting out to your email list only has an 18% open rate and on average a 2.6% average click-through rate. So again, I think it just comes back to, as a consumer, I mean, how many people are asking for our emails? Anytime I buy something, whether it's clothes, any retailer I do business with, they're always asking for my email, and I get hundreds of promotions. So that's why it's harder to engage the customer and kind of get through them. They've just been over exhausted in that channel. Let's see here. Okay, and we have the questions, and just so continue to ask those questions in the chat just real quick. Yeah, and just as Nick mentioned, put the questions in the chat and then we can answer those at the end. So yeah, just continue to put those in there and just know we're not ignoring you. We will get to them at the end in the Q&A. But we've ran similar marketing programs, and honestly, I personally have been a part of a lot of marketing programs and have been part of teams for, I've been in the automotive industry now for over 5 years. I've been in, local business type, I guess like targeting local business for over a decade now. So yeah, it's been some time. And it's true, like these rates aren't great, like it's 18% open rate is obviously not where you want to be. It's just not, it's not going to give you a good return. And just think about, like, the other thing to think about here is how much time is your team spending on coming up with these promotional emails? And ultimately it's, why? Like, for what? Like, why are they spending so much time? And it just comes back to just over exhausting that channel. And you want to be in the places that your customers are ultimately. So yeah, that's just a couple things to think about. But let's take a look at texting by the numbers. So again, 98% average open rate. It's very rare you're going to find someone who doesn't open a text. Like, it's just rare. Like I like me personally, like I get promotional text messages from some of the companies I do business with consistently, and I always open their texts and they send me promotional messages. And I can't tell you how many times I've taken advantage of a promo code or some type of offering that they're sending me. But 95%, and then like, here's another interesting, 95% of your texts get opened within 3 minutes. So it's usually pretty quick. People get that text on their phone, they look down, and it's just kind of where society is today. They open it right away. Your texts are going to get a 209% higher response rate than phone, email, or Facebook. So that is, again, massive. And not to say that any of those channels are bad, but as we continue, like, you definitely want to stay in those channels. But as we continue to advance as a society, the biggest thing for you, as a business owner, as a dealership, to think about your marketing strategy is, where is the most convenient place to, communicate with your customers and target them? And this is, kind of the trends, right? Most people and most businesses are switching to text messaging. Even like now, like my parents, I call them and they'll just text me back like, hey, I'm busy, let's text. And I'll be like, oh man, I was actually trying to call you and just see how you were doing. But even my parents, who aren't like the most tech savvy people are telling me to text them. So just think about that as we continue through the presentation. And then here's another interesting thing, like your coupon redemption rate is 10 times higher than other types of coupons. So here, this is in a more broader aspect with your local businesses, but as a dealership, as we think about it, how do we maximize revenue, right? And a couple things to think about in targeting, certain coupons is, why not offer, a lot of our dealerships have offered, buy 2 oil changes, get the third free in some of those maybe down months where inventory's slow, service is backed up, but we want to generate some extra revenue. That's a great place. Like, hey, like we're running a promo, click here on this link via text, and we're seeing a high response rate. And then just, so just a couple of things to think about with how you can leverage coupons, because it's definitely something that's possible. And even with like, if you have a parts department, that's a great way too. Like, hey, running this, Thanksgiving special, Black Friday special, click on this link to redeem your 10% off parts, aftermarket parts, if that's what you're working with. So just a couple of things to think about as you think of those coupons. But look, today's consumers, they expect a modern customer experience with communication that meets them where they are. Like we've discussed, they expect convenience, personalization, and human-like connection. And ultimately, this is all things that texting will cover for you. But yeah, however, text is underutilized. I think, not as we continue to go. And again, I've worked in this space for over 5 years. It is very, surprising to me a lot of times how underutilized texting is. And kind of as I mentioned earlier, only 12% of local businesses in the US are using SMS to market to their customers. And old school print and email still take up the lion's share of how we're marketing to our customers, which again isn't to say that those are bad channels. They're not. You should continue to use them, but there is a more convenient strategy in using text messaging. So yeah, texting is going to reach customers where they want to be reached. In a recent study by Podium, and Podium is, just so everyone knows, it isn't just a company that we don't only solely focus on automotive dealerships. We work with over 100,000 businesses across multiple verticals. So, we've been doing this for, over close to a decade now. So what we found in a recent study to all of our customer base and all the different, industries that we work in is that text messaging is preferred 2 times more than any other communication method. And again, I think that's because it adds convenience. And, people, when it comes to convenience, people think of the likes of like Netflix, Uber, DoorDash becoming more and more prevalent. Convenience is king, right? Like when people in our industry are looking to transact with a dealership, they are looking for the most convenient experience and who's going to, answer their questions directly and get to the point and meet them, in the channel they prefer. In fact, over 65% of consumers think texting makes working with a local business more convenient. So yeah, the most cost-effective marketing campaigns you can run happen over text. And, I want everyone to take a look at this slide here. And as you can see by the numbers, right? Like, it's like I tell everyone, I don't think any of these marketing strategies are bad. In fact, I recommend, the dealerships I work with all the time. Yeah, you want to be in all these places, but ultimately it always leads back to, whether I'm marketing on Twitter, Facebook, Google Ads, YouTube, wherever I'm doing that, it's always going to come back to, hey, how do I get in touch with the business and what's the most convenient way? But then you look at the cost of just effective marketing and texting, it's almost the most cost-effective marketing campaigns you can run as a dealership. Looking at the data here, again, compared to digital advertising, SMS campaigns are extremely low cost to run. And like email, SMS marketing is trackable and provides valuable insights into your customer behavior. But unlike email, it reaches your customers where they want to be reached instantly. So that's one thing to think about, again, in the text versus email debate. But yeah, let's jump into compliance. This is something that definitely comes up anytime you start to leverage SMS. And this is probably one of the main reasons that most dealerships are often hesitant to use SMS, and it's definitely something that comes up. So, as the slide says, with great power comes great responsibility. And this is true when it comes to texting. The convenience, the power, the impact it has in the consumer experience is massive. So before getting started, you should be aware of a few things. Text is more intimate, even more invasive than other forms of communication. text messages appear directly on a person's phone, whether they are at home, work, asleep, on a date. Texts are always showing up, even when you're spending time with family. So because of this, local businesses have an obligation, and dealerships as well, right, to use messaging ethically, which means following applicable rules and regulations. We'll get into kind of the more specifics as we continue here shortly. So first, let's jump into some SMS marketing myths, just to address some of the ones that continue to come up, because there are some more common misconceptions when it comes to SMS marketing. So first, SMS marketing always gets businesses in trouble. This is clearly false. We definitely, we work with over 100,000 businesses, and we can guarantee you that is not the case. Myth number 2, SMS marketing laws are too complicated to understand. This is also false. I think the biggest thing here is just making sure that you're aware of the way it works, which again is obviously there's a bunch of different laws out there, but ultimately it's just knowing like the do's and don'ts that we'll go over, and just making sure you follow a specific process, which honestly, like once you figure out that process, you'll find it's not very complicated at all. SMS marketing is spam. Again, this is false. The truth is, SMS marketing in a compliant way comes down to being transparent and only messaging people who have opted in. That is, they've provided prior express consent to the sender. In the United States, this involves abiding by the rules set out by, TCPA and other similar regulations. The TCPA was put into practice to protect consumers from spam, including unwanted calls and texts. Other countries, have similar protections in place. But spam isn't just annoying. Look, spamming your customers is poor practice, and it's something you should stay away from, and it can carry repercussions. Not only does it severely damage customer relationships and trust, but it can also result in fines. Campaigns above a 3% unsubscribe rate also put your textable phone number at risk with carriers. So it's crucial that you only message contacts who have opted in to receive promotional messages from your business. Podium itself does have an opt-in process to streamline this for you. SMS marketing in a compliant way isn't complicated. You just need to know what to watch out for and put your customers first. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's always tempting to man, I came up with this really good content, this really good SMS campaign. I just want to send it to everyone. And we just have to resist that temptation and continue to build up our opt-in list. There's many ways you can do this. And not only Podium, there's a lot of tools out there that can help you with this, but this is something that you just want to continue to build in that opt-in list. And that's what we're seeing, even with our customers, their opt-in lists are getting bigger and bigger week by week, day by day, just because this is how people want to be communicated to, especially with some of the businesses that they want to do business with the most. Okay, SMS marketing pro tips and best practices. Here are a few best practices. Number 1, make sure you have proper consent from each recipient of the message. So again, getting an opt-in, there's many forms to doing this. Mention your dealership's name, so that way they know, hey, it's coming from you. I think that's one of the things that we miss on, just because sometimes we come up with it and we just forget something basic like that. So just make sure you always include your dealership's name. Alert your customer about possible messaging fees. This usually doesn't come into play too often, but you still just want to do it just to play it safe. And then mention the frequency of monthly messages. Include the option to opt out of all future texts. And I think that's one of the most and easiest way to make sure you're always staying on point when it comes to this, because overall, that's, I think, one of the things that's can be frustrating is they feel like they get a text out of the blue, but usually putting in that opt out a lot of times will just give the customer just that, almost that safeguard that, oh yeah, this is a business, right? This is someone that I've worked with, I know who they are. And then last, make sure you honor those opt-outs. That's the most important thing. Don't continue to add them to campaign lists, or make sure you work with someone, or a tool that you're using that it has some of those rules in place where If they do opt out, it's not going to continue to send, any campaign messages to them. Okay. And look, when we send a message, let's make it count. So now that we've talked about staying compliant, let's talk about how to be effective. As a dealership, you want to use SMS marketing to engage new customers. The goal is to do that, increase customer lifetime value, and drive more revenue. What you don't want to do is annoy your customers or damage your brand. That's the last thing you want to do when it comes to this, especially, with competition being so high. Like you don't want to be known as the dealership that, just annoys customers. And so the real goal is to give your text the feel and value of one-to-one interactions. There are a few key practices you can keep in mind to achieve this. So yeah, let's jump into the do's and don'ts when it comes to SMS. So let's start with the do. Use conversational language. One of the biggest turnoffs when it comes to marketing messages is that businesses sound like they're shouting, buy now, offer ends today, and we do it in all caps, and we do exclamation points, and I'm as a consumer, I might be in the middle of reading a book, and then I read that and I'm like, why are you yelling at me? Right? So yeah, make sure you take that into account. So when appealing to your customers, keep messages lighthearted, short, and conversational, just like you're talking to a friend. Ultimately, like that's the experience you're trying to provide. You can even include emojis to keep the conversational personal and informal. So I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to this. Like, you don't want to make it come off as like too like, yeah, like, hey, like everything must go by today, and shouting at customers. So they'll be excited to hear from you either way, right? So another do, make sure you send it during business hours. If your customer sees a promo at 4 a.m., they're probably not going to be happy. They're like, why are you spamming me at 4 a.m.? And then they start to think of it as spam, right? Because then it's almost like, oh, this was sent to me on like an auto timer. And so like they sent it to me at 4 a.m. Like, why would they do that? So again, it loses that personal touch. And so when you send the, text during the hours people are regularly working there, they just feel that it's very human-like, and they feel like, hey, like you respect their privacy, right? And keep in mind that sales and event promotions are most effective when they're last-minute impulses. So if you have an event on Wednesday night, consider sending the message as late as Wednesday afternoon. So those are some key takeaways there for you. Another do, use simple messages. And again, this comes back to kind of like operating within that 160 character limit. And that doesn't mean like, smash everything into those 160 characters as well, like trying to give them as much information as possible. That's why you want to use a tool that can, track links, and you can send a short link that they can click on to get more information if they are interested, and not try to slam everything within those 160 characters. So yeah, just try to stay away from complex messaging that could be misinterpreted. And then look, if you're sharing information about an event or promotion, make sure you include the date so your audience has all the information they need. So that's just another key takeaway with one of those event promo messages that we could send. Do provide value. So the key to successful SMS campaigns is providing actual value. Send unique content that is specific and relevant to the demographics you're targeting. Don't send a 20-year-old college student in Chicago promo for, a brand new, Mercedes Benz that might, cost $100,000, right? And that you might be the only one in the area who has it. You probably, and that's not to say that they can't, but just based on customer history, like that car might be targeted more towards someone who has bought in the past at $70,000, at $80,000, or is coming up on a lease for a more expensive vehicle, whereas you got this 20-year-old's information from their parents, right? And someone, that's how you kind of got to texting them. So just a couple of things to think about there. You just want to make sure you target the right audience at all times. Again, include a CTA. So if you miss the CTA, essentially you miss the point of SMS marketing. Messages should include a direct call to action, and that's what your CTA stands for, is call to action. So such as like, check this out, stop by, leave a review. There should be a purpose for them to do something. You want them to interact with you. And so you always want to make sure there's a call to action in your messaging. And again, I would always include a link. This is a huge do. You want to include that link, but don't let your links eat up the valuable space in your messages. Again, you want to send like a link that takes up 60 of the 160 characters. And so here's like where you can use link shorteners or purchase an SMS marketing platform that includes the shortened links for you. That way, again, you can add a little bit more to that message without taking up too much space with the link. Do respond in real time. So again, like if you're going to send out a promo, the worst thing like you can do is send out a promo with a call to action and saying, hey, like respond, to this message if you want to claim, your service package, or if you want to, get a free valuation on your car to possibly sell it to us. And then the customer never gets responded to. So again, you always want to make sure if you are going to, get into like campaign messaging and sending these out, you want to make sure you're monitoring the campaign and you're responding in a very timely manner. And so again, just try to respond as quickly as possible and avoid disengagement, and increase your connectivity by responding in real time. Okay. You also want to track your performance. This is key in campaign marketing. Again, like campaign marketing, or SMS campaign marketing is very different from maybe some of the bigger promotions you're running around an event, or something that you're putting a lot of money into, or a big play that the team, your dealership or maybe group is running. You purchase a new store and there's a theme around that store. The thing with SMS marketing campaign, and the reason you want to track performance, is you're going to find that certain campaigns work and others don't. But again, a text is very, it's very informal, and it's meant to be very informal and more personal. So people get it, right? Like if you send them one this month and then another next month, you're going to find those trends of what works and what people like. Like, are there certain keywords you're using in one campaign compared to another that you think is making the difference? Or flat out, like our demographic in the area that our dealerships are in, they don't really respond to this type of marketing, or they don't really respond to this type of message, but we found that this campaign they did. So just make sure you're always tracking that performance so you can find the trends for what works for you. Because I cover North America for our automotive vertical here, and I can tell you, in the 5 years plus that I've been doing this, is no two dealerships run the same, no two demographics are the same, and certain people in certain areas respond to different type of messages and different type of processes. So just make sure that you're tracking that performance so you can find the trend that's best fitted for your dealership. Always make sure you address your customer by name. Again, this is just a little bit, like this honestly is just more personal touch. Yeah, you want to make sure even though you're sending out an SMS campaign in bulk, like you want to make sure it still comes off as a one-to-one message, and just use your messaging system to address each customer by name. Personalization is always crucial, in today's market. People, as much as we might not admit it, a lot of people like to hear the sound of their own name. Okay, let's jump into some don'ts. Don't send too frequently. So this is, something we want to jump into, and kind of falls into that spam category. Inundating your customers with messages leads to frustration and stop replies. And this is where you start to see some of those jumps and unsubscribe. Often this has to do more with the content of your messages than how often you send them. If your campaigns have high value, you're less likely to have a problem. So I think those are like kind of the balance between, sending too frequently. If you are going to, make sure it's just relevant to the people you're sending to. That was one of the things, that we found that, far too often, dealerships, or even just some of our customers, they would send, a campaign message to their whole customer base every time. And a lot of times it just wasn't relevant to a lot of those customers. So that's why they just thought, they start to unsubscribe. So make sure, if you're pulling those opt-ins, you have some way to target like what kind of customer they are and why this campaign would be relevant to them. So just always do that. Don't use slang. While it certainly increases a casual feel, it also risks, unprofessionalism and misunderstandings with your customers. Again, avoid wordplay or anything that could be misleading. This is just more of to just avoid situations that, you don't want to be in, that even though they could be cleared up with a quick message at the end of the day, why, even put yourself in that situation, just kind of, the thought process there. Make sure you don't forget to identify yourself. Again, figure out how to do this creatively with each successive message so it doesn't get old. You might try versions such as, hey, this is Babbitt's Auto. Or we could say, hey, or another example, we're so glad that you loved your service or your experience at Babbitt's Auto. So just a couple different ways to always mention your name in a different format. So just make sure that you do identify yourself every time, and don't forget to do that. Another don't ignore your opt-in and opt-out rules. Again, comes down to compliance, and incompliance undermines trust and damages your reputation. Remember to only message customers who have opted in, and make sure to respect their decisions, because you want strong relationships and happy customers. Messaging in a compliant way is in your best interest. And, one thing I always think about is, when someone, whether it's in business or just personal, like you text someone and say, hey, text me. And then the first thing they do, or as a business or as just a person, they call you, you're like, why are you calling me? So kind of the same goes here. Like, make sure you respect those rules, right? Like if they opt out, just respect the rule, like, because then, this is where the incompliance starts. And those are the kind of things that can, get your dealership in trouble. So don't make it sound like a mass text. So as we mentioned, your message may be going out to 700 people, but it should sound like it's going out, going to one. So just make sure you take that personalization to the next level in these campaigns, because that's how you're going to get more engagement out of them and see the higher return. Okay. Couple things to go over here on how to market like a human. So today's consumers crave personalization in their brand interactions. They want to feel like a real person at your dealership is contacting them, and only them. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can provide to our customers, is just that, hey, like when you're talking to me, you're talking to the dealership. And so if you want your threads to feel like individual interactions, it's crucial to make sure your SMS marketing messages are personal as possible. You can do this by including relevant personal details in your messages. Again, using name, on a birthday is a great time, location, what their last purchase was, or even previous feedback that you might have saved in your CRM that you could use that could be relevant. So a couple of things there. And then again, maximize your opt-ins. So many businesses and dealerships find maximizing their marketable SMS list to be the hardest part of SMS marketing, but it really doesn't have to be. There are a number of touch points along your customer journey where collecting an opt-in is natural and even expected. If you take advantage of these points, the list will build itself up. So for example, if you have a service appointment, send a text to request an online review. Once they leave the review, you can incentivize them to opt in to future text in exchange for exclusive discounts. So again, promotional opt-ins is another thing to think about. Like, hey, opt into our SMS, campaigns, and 15% off that next oil change. And so it's important to, honestly, it really is important to collect opt-ins at multiple entry points. That way you're consistently growing that list, and your ability to nurture, some of these contacts. You can turn that nurturing into actual transactions. So that's the important part of that process. Opt-in entry points. So here are some examples that Podium can provide. So we do, on your website chat, your review or survey request, a mobile payment request, your appointment reminders. And then you can even build, you don't obviously have to use Podium, but there's other ways to do that. And there's other ways like social media posts. So that's a great time, like whether it's on your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook, make a post for people to opt into, your SMS campaigns. Events is another big, honestly, it's another big place to collect those. And I just think of, some of the simplest ways. If you just have a form at an event and it's like, hey, opt into SMS marketing at this event, and, we'll put you in a raffle for, an iPad or, an Apple Watch, whatever it is, you could do something like that. Homepage invites on your websites, or even a pop-up banner or something you could do. Your email footer, you can always have it there for people to make sure they can click on it and opt in. And then, you could even do stickers and in-store signage. Again, if this is a strategy you should leverage. So it's something we should all start to think about investing in, and the strategy behind how we make it most effective. So just a few ideas there. So let's jump into what good looks like in this space. So we're going to look at a couple of examples. So there's hundreds of valuable cases for SMS marketing. For dealerships, you might use text to, build loyalty, with 5-star customer reviews, or even offering exclusive discounts, on service or parts, whatever it might be. And you might even re-engage with your customers who asked for an appointment, via web chat recently, but didn't follow through. So just a couple things to think about there. As you read through this example, this is with a retailer, and obviously, this is all use cases that we've found in our experiences. But in this example, you can see the retailer, Pinky Palm, does a nice job including an expiration date on the campaign, personalizing their message, and encouraging specific questions that lead to a transaction. And then they have even a textable payment link to make their conversations even more worthwhile for their customers. So again, that call to action is massive here, and even leading it to a transaction. In this example, Sam Cycling addresses Rachel by name and identifies themselves immediately. They also take their anniversary as an opportunity to benefit Rachel and encourage conversation with, feel free to text any questions. So another thing to think about there. In this example, LB Carpeting uses SMS marketing to employ an effective referral campaign, encouraging response with their appealing promotion and inclusive feel. So again, just think of like, these are just a few examples. We have several again in the auto industry, specifically around buybacks, promos, events are massive. And so just a couple there to think about. Okay. Market like a pro with Podium campaigns. So here, not all SMS marketing tools are made equally. With Podium campaigns, our auto dealerships are able to build and manage an opt-in list, use targeted offers to engage their customers via messaging, and report on those efforts. Podium campaigns is made for local SMS marketing, providing exactly what you need to simply build, send, and report on promotional activity. The dealerships who have used the functionality, I can tell you, have maximized return on it and are seeing, all sorts of different case studies that they can use it in different situations. And if you're not familiar with Podium, our campaign solution works beautifully with the entire platform. Again, Podium will allow you to power, your customer conversations that convert again and again conveniently from a single inbox. It's built to improve every stage of your customer life cycle, so you can engage with the right customer through the right channel at the right time. Ultimately, what you're going to find by leveraging campaigns with Podium is also honestly a big consolidation of a bunch of different functionalities you might be using through other platforms, just making it more convenient for your customers to interact with you and even your employees to interact with their tools. And so again, today, Podium, we work with over 100,000 small and multi-location businesses around the globe. We reach 1 in 4 cell phone users in the US. So, all the data we've provided isn't just, numbers that, we found on the internet. It's from real life experience. And, we're helping dealers like yours to win more revenue and market share, compete in this modern and on-demand customer experience world that we live in today, and honestly improve your speed and efficiency when it comes to interactions with customers. So that is our presentation today on SMS Marketing 101. I think now we will transition to the Q&A portion. And Nick, I think we have several questions in the chat, right?
Indeed. Great presentation, Isaac. Thank you so much. And just as a reminder to everyone that we are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link to that recording so you can revisit the great information that's been shared and distribute it around to your colleagues at your dealership. And Isaac, just to get our Q&A segment started, near the top of your presentation and throughout as well, it described how text messaging can be leveraged not only by the sales department, but also service and other areas as well. Just some anecdotal observations about success rates, open rates, as far as a sales campaign versus a service, or perhaps one that involves vehicle financing or other elements of that might be at a dealership. What can you share there as far as the success, depending on what topic the campaign is focused on?
Yeah, I think the most important, the numbers actually, the one thing we found, and it's kind of twofold. The numbers we found is, as long as you're targeting the right demographic and the relevant content to the right people in your customer base, the numbers actually stay pretty thorough. Your average open rate is going to be 98%. It's still going to stay the same. When you start to see kind of the downgrade is, or a dip in that number, is when you start to kind of send the same campaigns to your whole customer base every time, or you start to send content that really isn't relevant to that type of customer. And that's when you're going to start to see them start to unsubscribe, start to not open your messages. And that's, so it just really comes down to that. But as long as you're staying relevant in your content to the right people in your customer base, then you should be, your numbers and your open rate should always stay the same. So
again, our special guest here for this webinar is Isaac Hernandez, the Director of Automotive Sales at Podium. And again, referencing back to your presentation, Isaac, you made some comparisons of SMS text messaging versus some other potential avenues. And a question came in particular in regards comparison of text messaging versus LinkedIn as an example. And if my memory serves from your presentation, I think that was one of the more costly avenues that dealerships could take is using LinkedIn. If you could just revisit the effectiveness factor that text messaging has versus some other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, look, as even just taking my Podium cap off and my industry knowledge and just putting myself in the consumer chair, when it comes to the automotive industry, I much first think texting than probably someone, marketing to me or trying to chat with me on LinkedIn, to purchase from them. And so ultimately, I do think LinkedIn has its place for us, in the automotive world. But I think when it comes to, business to consumer interaction, honestly, your return is going to be just astronomically higher in texting and finding the avenues to texting than LinkedIn chat. Again, it's not to say that you shouldn't market on LinkedIn and whatnot. I think it has its place, but I think your return is, it's just as a consumer myself, if I'm buying a car, I'm not thinking, that I'm going to do it from LinkedIn. I'd much rather get a text and about it with a dealership I've done business with before. So just something to think about.
Again, indeed, our webinar focus today entitled SMS Marketing 101 for auto dealers. As our special guest is Isaac Hernandez, the Director of Automotive Sales at Podium. And their contact information is there on the screen, the website, a path to send a text message, as well as an email address as well. And If you have questions for Isaac, please just use the chat function here on the Zoom platform. And a couple other really intriguing questions have come in, Isaac, and one I would greatly benefit as well on a personal level when you describe the importance of including a link in your message. How do you all address the apprehension that the recipient might have about clicking on that link in light of phishing campaigns and other unscrupulous activity that some individuals try to conduct on the internet? How can dealers address those concerns that the link that they're sending to their customers is safe and fine to use?
Yeah, no, and it's a valid concern, and yeah, I love that question, and it does come up. I think a couple things here to keep in mind. I think the first part is always make sure when like you are using SMS campaigns and leveraging, you're using a local area code phone number. I think that's the most important. I think that's where, as consumers, we start to get weary when I get like a text from an 888 number or someone out of my area code, then it makes me like uncomfortable. So always make sure you have that local presence and the area code of your phone number when sending these messages. I think that's the first and foremost. And then as we kind of talk through the presentation, personalization is key. Like you don't want to send out something that feels like a mass text, because that's where you start getting those concerns to click on links, because it's like, this doesn't really feel too personal to me. So that's why, like, when you are doing SMS campaigns, I think one of the most important things is to make sure you have a targeted audience. Like, hey, like everyone that I'm targeting with this campaign is in a similar situation, and the campaign that I'm going to send to them is very relevant, and it's not going to make it like where it's like, why am I getting this text out of the blue? It's like, oh yeah, like I've done service with this dealership before. It makes sense, right? And that's why I think like, some of the other strategies of putting, like trying to collect the opt-ins at events, the signage at your dealership, and as they come in for oil changes and they start to see, that kind of starts to spread, and it gives them that comfortability. So yeah.
Great answer. Thank you for that guidance there. And another similarly related question that's intriguing as well revisits another important part of your presentation, the opt-in, opt-out component of text messaging. If you could perhaps offer some clarity in regard to if a customer opts out of maybe some of the marketing efforts from the dealership, but yet that customer is still an active one at the service drive, for example. Right. They're getting their vehicle an oil change or other service, and the dealership would still need to communicate. How do you approach that type of situation that perhaps the customer wants to be contacted about their particular vehicle, but maybe not as much with other marketing campaigns?
Yeah, no, and that is a great question. It's one that comes up often, as we continue down this path of SMS campaigns. The answer is simple. There are two different type of opt-ins, right? And there are two different type of opt-outs. One is specifically for SMS marketing, and one is just for SMS communication. The answer here is it really depends on the tool you're using, right? Like a tool like Podium, if one of our customers opts out of the SMS marketing campaign, we don't opt them out of their conversation that they've had previously with the dealership. Because again, like you said, that doesn't, just because they don't want to be marketed to doesn't mean they don't want to have communication about updates on their vehicle when they're in the service drive, or, they interact with you about, possibly purchasing a new vehicle, and they just want to like stick to talking about when that buying process is happening on their time. So yeah, it really depends on the tool you're using, but yeah, there is a difference in opt-out. So if they do opt out of SMS marketing campaign or marketing, that definitely doesn't mean that they've opted out of just normal communication. But again, that is where, us as dealerships, business owners, we just have to make sure that we respect those decisions, right? And like, we're not like, and again, it's just about respecting, people's privacy and making sure that, if they tell us, hey, they don't want to be marketed to, then don't market to them, right? But that doesn't mean texting isn't the most convenient way to communicate with them, right? And so just make sure you respect the, some of the requests by your customers. So
that's great information to know. Reinforcing the title of today's webinar, SMS Marketing 101 for auto dealerships, with our special guest, Isaac Hernandez, the Director of Automotive Sales at Podium. And Isaac, to round out our time together for this webinar, just perhaps some closing thoughts about when and what campaigns should be orchestrated by dealerships, perhaps depending on the time of the month or the time of the year. Any closing thoughts or any final suggestions on how dealerships can leverage the capabilities of SMS texting, depending on what their dealership is, the time of year, or any other components that might be in play?
Yeah, I think, the final thoughts for me, and being in this industry is, as we know, the automotive industry is ever changing. And again, it always comes back to, I've heard all sorts of things when it comes to the automotive industry, like, oh, are people going to continue to want to do business with dealerships, or they want to go to just a direct order model, all these different things. But the thing that sticks true, and the reason, this industry has been a landmark, in the United States and Northern America, is because, our ability to adapt. It really, that's what it comes down to. We're willing to adapt to the landscape that we're provided with, and we're always ready, to make those moves. I think, where we hurt ourselves and in considering this is where we just aren't willing to embrace some of those changes that are happening, right? And a lot of us, like, we've had great experiences with email promotions, with Google Ads, and putting money into all sorts of things, TV, radio. Again, not to say that those things aren't good, but people are wanting to communicate more and more, via text, and they want to, it comes down to just a more convenient experience. And that's one thing we all have to be willing to adapt to. And I think when it comes to SMS campaigns, that flat out, like, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're unwilling to embrace it, right? And so, as I tell everyone, and even the customers, that have their hesitations, I always tell them, like, hey, because we're doing SMS campaigns, it doesn't mean we're going to dive head in first and just start to blast out all of your customers. No, let's ease into it. Let's see what works. Let's find out what doesn't, because again, no two dealerships are the same. No two demographics are the same. So we have to find what works. But the one thing that is true is this is the way that people are wanting to do business, and they love that personal touch. So let's make it convenient for them to interact with us. So those would be my final thoughts and closing words. And again, I appreciate everyone's time today and having me. I always enjoy doing these. And again, feel free to reach out. The information's there on the screen, so don't hesitate to reach out. And if you want to speak with me directly, feel free to email, that email and ask to speak with me directly, and I'll give you a call. So happy to chat with anyone.
Very good. Again, that's Isaac Hernandez, the Director of Automotive Sales at Podium. Again, their website, podium.com. And if you want to send the company a text message, the number is there on the screen, 1-833-276-3486. Or if you prefer email, that option is available as well, webinars@podium.com. Isaac, again, thank you so much for sharing the great information here on this webinar.
Thank you. See you, everyone.
And on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.